Chapter 3, Recycled Pain. Breaking past denial and rebuilding our marriage led to the startling acknowledgement of other losses that had always remained under the surface. It doesn't matter who you are, what position you hold, what race or religion you are, or what physical abilities you have. You are not exempt from the tragedies of loss. Neither are you exempt from the awful side effects such as fear, feelings of unworthiness and self-doubt. Unfortunately, they are no respecter of persons. These are things that affect us all at some point. If we don't acknowledge and accept the process that is a necessary part of healing, we can never be free of the things that hold us back. However, my question is, if it's true that all these things are unavoidable, what do we do with all this pain and suffering? I believe the bigger question is, what can God do with all this pain and suffering? I would like to speak from my life experience and say that He recycles it. For Vaughn and me, it was only after our marriage was restored to a measure of satisfaction for us both that we realized we had missed the whole process of grieving our losses from the disease. On one occasion, when Vaughn and I were in a marriage counseling session, the counselor said, "So you've lost the baby and you've now acknowledged that grief. That's great. But have you really mourned the loss of your health?" I was speechless. I didn't even know how to respond. I thought, here we were to talk about rebuilding our marriage. I never would have linked our marriage breakdown to the loss of my health. Yet that one question clearly indicated that the loss of my physical mobility was another thing I needed to address before I could heal and love again. Yes, after that virus hit, we had moved forward with the necessary choices and the required physical therapy. However, the necessity of grieving our losses was overshadowed by the intense activity. Every effort was being poured into beating the odds of this diagnosis and being the exception to this bleak future that was predicted. But what about those real losses for the both of us? We continued our lives the best we knew how. We got married as we had planned and stumbled through different phases of our adjustment. People always say, never make major decisions after death. And while you might be thinking, Vian, no one died. Yet I was absorbing the loss of my health, my independence, without even being aware of the deep, unspoken mourning. And I was in complete denial. I was living like this big iceberg. If people could only see the mess that was underneath. There's no shortcuts to healing, no magic solutions. I have found someone far better. God Himself. When God gets in the middle of life's messes, bad becomes good. Genesis 5:20 tells us that what was meant for bad, God will use for good. My creative summary of that would be that God is saying, let me recycle that pain. Let me create something beautiful. I had no idea that I was on track of recycling my pain. When you first hear my story from beginning to end, you'll get to see the happy ending. And you get caught up in the romance of he stayed, but miss the depth of the recycling process. This is why I have chosen to go back there with you and take you through it. You see, for true change and healing to occur, we had to acknowledge our losses and understand the process needed to go through them. This is commonly understood as the grieving process, but it doesn't always involve a funeral and a casket. Losses such as we both experience require a process in order for transformation to be possible. Yes, I was mourning the loss of my physical independence, having to now cope with all the limitations that came with that. My pattern of denial was continuing to shape my life. Yes, I was in a wheelchair with vastly reduced mobility. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Even more so, I was mourning the loss of me. All that I had envisioned for my life to be was slipping away. In order for God to recycle my pain, I had to let go of it. It's hard to believe that what I had thought destroyed me would ultimately lead me to more courage and freedom than I ever knew existed. It's because of that discovery that I'm committed to that reality of hope, that it can be ignited in the darkest of places. Vaughn and I have both suffered tremendous loss, but he wouldn't really tell you he's missing out. That's just another part of the amazing man that he is. There are times, even today, Vaughn looks at me and says, "Sweetie, we are better because of you." I might have some words to say about that, but however, the fact still remains that we both suffered tremendous loss. Plus, we both healed in our own way. By now, I'm sure you'll all agree, when God recycles pain, he does it with amazing detail, and he truly personalizes the process. Allow me to introduce you to another dear friend, Shirley Thiessen. She is another incredible person with an amazing story of courage. She also allowed God to come in and recycle her unbearable pain. Shirley vulnerably writes about her life-altering loss in her book, The Little Black Funeral Dress, 5 Things I Wish I Had Known About Grief. Here's a little window into Shirley's story as she tells it. Her insights are also valuable as we consider recycling our pain and growing through the process.
In 2012, my husband Carrie and I experienced what we considered to be a parent's worst nightmare, the death of a child. Only 12 days after celebrating our son's wedding, we had the devastating task of planning his funeral. Our son Jordan died tragically in a workplace accident. While my grief changes from year to year, I will never be over it, not until I reach heaven. But in the meantime, I have been experiencing firsthand how God is able to recycle my pain for his good purpose. And I know he wants to do this for you too. With our participation, God will repurpose our pain. The question is, will we let him? No matter what worldview you hold, I would hazard to guess that you may be grieving a painful loss right now. It's the reality of being part of the human race. Like me, some of you are grieving the loss of a loved one. For some, it's the loss of your marriage or the loss of a friendship. For others, it's the loss of your health or the loss of a job or even the loss of a dream. While absorbing the horrendous nightmare of my son's death, there is one truth that has been imprinted on my heart as a result of my history with God, and it's this: Jesus is my foundation, my purpose, and my living hope. And while my husband and my kids are at the epicenter of the people I love most dearly, they are not my only reason for living. They are not the ultimate source of my joy. Only God can satisfy that role. C.S. Lewis wisely puts it this way: don't let your happiness depend on something you may lose. You may lose a child, a spouse, your health, your job, your reputation, your dearest friend. You could even lose your mind. But God promises that he will never leave you or forsake you. He is our reason for living. Well, personally, I have found that God promises to recycle our pain for his good purpose as we participate. You may be wondering, so why should I care about recycling? Well, consider this. Our pain can become a toxin in our soul that will stunt our vitality and health. We all know people who could be described as stuck in their grief. They're not easy to be around. They carry an air of cynicism and hopelessness. They might still be functioning in society, but they aren't really living with any sense of joy or purpose. The pain and suffering that they have experienced has crushed their spirit. For a time, this was a description of me. But gradually, with God's grace and compassionate friends, I have experienced a hope-filled story that is giving others courage to trust God with their painful loss. Because our grief avoidance society rarely talks about death and grief, I've chosen to leverage what God has taught me through my painful grief journey and use it to help others navigate their loss in healthy ways. Here's the good news. God promises to recycle your pain for His good purpose as you participate and trust His plan.
When your world gets turned upside down, or we get hurt by others, it is predictable that depression and mistrust can become a new normal. When we face prolonged challenges or impossible situations, the trauma and fear result in emotional paralysis. Not knowing where to turn for help, we often remain stuck. How is it even possible to move forward and be free? How you choose to respond will determine if you move forward in freedom or remain paralyzed by fear. I shared all of that with you to allow you to really see the process of healing and moving forward. Healing comes in different timing and in different ways. And often healing comes in ways we don't even realize or think we need. There are 7 stages of loss and grief that we travel through. The stages of the process need to be acknowledged in order for us to keep moving forward. You never want to rush this process, nor do you want to stay too long in one stage. Your journal notes and record of your feelings attached to events will serve you as a roadmap. This is why I've encouraged you to journal as you're reading this book so we can share these discoveries and transformations. Your journal can be a great benefit to you. If you become lost or sidetracked on this journey, the words you either write or quote from someone else can provide hope that the destination is possible. You see, without hope, we know it is nearly impossible to survive. This is why I am believing that something learned here will act as a tool in your survival guide. It may take each of us a different length of time to reach healing, but if we keep finding the strength and courage to push forward, we will get through it. You will get through it. It becomes very clear that in each of the stages of the grief process, there will be what seems to be an escape option that one might choose instead of moving forward. Like me, when I was more comfortable in my pain than the discomfort of working through infidelity. There are emotions that we experience at each stage. And of course, these stages do not happen in a straight line. Do you have pain that needs to be recycled? Allow yourself to sit here right now for a few minutes undistracted. Just you and your thoughts. May I suggest spending time looking at the 7 stages and making notes in your journal on the things to consider from Shirley's journey. This is a safe place for your reflections. The second model, How People Feel Through the Stages of Change, presents yet another helpful guide because it shows how change does not always move in a straight line. Many times, even though we are actually making progress, we may find ourselves circling back to the intensity of our experience. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. However, as indicated here, change is possible, and change is happening. Dr. Kubler-Ross refined her model to include 7 stages of loss. The 7 stages of loss model is a more in-depth analysis of the components of the grief process. These 7 stages include shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. Before we move on, I want to acknowledge that while forgiveness isn't listed either in the 7 stages of grief model or how people feel through the 7 stages of change, my personal, though unprofessional opinion is that forgiveness is most definitely an underlining factor through each and every stage of this process. Only then can we allow God to recycle our pain.